Welcome back to the Facit Homes channel and welcome to our Facit Build series, a new series that we're filming where we're going to take you through a project from concept all the way through to completion. So from design, going through planning, foundations, deploying the microfactory, everything you could want to know about building your own Facit home. And so in this episode, it's actually become a bit of a bonus episode since we filmed this, where we actually go through a lot of the common questions people have before they even get to signing up with Facit Homes. So in this episode, we're going to be going back to the studio and talking with Bruce, our founder and CEO, about some of the common questions clients have when they first come to us. And throughout the series, we're going to be fast forwarding to where we are now with a fully built structure and eventually a complete project where you can see the complete process. So in this episode, we're going to jump back to our studio in Hoxton and sit down with Bruce and go through some of the commonly asked questions about building your dream house with Facit Homes.
When the clients first contact us, they've got a lot of different concerns in their head, from getting planning permission to costs to what will the design be like. And we're kind of dealing with all of those things, which is what we do as a business. We're thinking about the entire process from start to finish. At the beginning of the project, we spend a lot of time just talking to the client about their brief. What is it that they're trying to achieve from the project as a whole? So that could be their ideas around specific ways of living. They might have specific bits of furniture. They might know the site really well, so that they want to, capture a certain aspect or a bit of daylight. There's a whole world of things, and our job is to go and make sure that the customer is telling us what they need to, that we're gathering all that information, and we're thinking about the whole thing, about delivering it as a whole and making sure that the house is going to be what the customer wants. So sometimes that needs a fair bit of conversation, talking to them, talking about their family or the way they live or who's going to come and visit, all sorts of things. So we try and get to know the client a little bit, and then we start to think about the bigger things, how we're going to get on site, where the car's going to park, planning constraints, and we think about all of these things at the same time. The way that we develop the design is to try and do it in time with the client. So our aim is not to come up with the complete solution off the back of our head and just come and present it to them. What we want to do is bring them along on the journey. So we are developing a brief with them. So that might be just a list of rooms, sizes, all their requirements, or anything specific about each room. So we want to do step by step through the process. So we want to have a kind of strategic layout first before we start really developing it into what you would think of as a full design. So it's the relationship between the rooms. So the kitchen is going to be on the east, or the bedrooms are going to be on the west, and agree that step by step, so that we're not going too far ahead and then them saying, I don't want it to work like that, so that we can develop the design layer by layer, if you like. At Facit Homes, we've been going quite a long time. We've been building houses since 2010, and we're taking full responsibility for the design and build. So we spend a lot of time, and have spent a lot of time during that period, making sure we're choosing the right products, making sure that the doors that we install, for example, are really high quality, really well installed, and that are going to last, and that we're not going to get customers coming back to us complaining, or there'll be a defect. So we're very focused on really good quality products that are going to perform throughout the entire build. Often at the beginning of the process, I think customers' biggest fears are that kind of leap into the unknown, where they don't know what it's going to be like, and they don't know at what point the design is going to reveal itself. And that fear about, am I going to like it, I think is probably one of the biggest fears that customers have. And that's our job, to take them through that process, make them feel comfortable, and also take on board their ideas. So if you look at the portfolio of properties that Facit Homes have built, you'll see that they all have quite different styles and forms. There's some consistency there in terms of the product that we produce, but the designs are influenced from the customers. So some customers come to us and have very strong opinions about aesthetics or materials, or they might want a very traditional form, or they might want a very contemporary, very bold form. And we always take those ideas on board, and that's what defines each property. Some customers are slightly more willing for us to lead the way, and they want us to really guide the design process. But we're happy with either solution. So, some of our best properties have been, created from a customer with a really strong idea who really has something that they want us to create, and us kind of collaborating together. So when we're designing the house for each customer, there are certain considerations, particularly on the ground floor, about how open plan or how cellular it is. So sometimes we end up with very open designs where you might have a kitchen with no separation onto the dining room and no separation onto the lounge, and the whole thing is a very open space. But we're still thinking about small divisions to try and delineate those spaces and not make it difficult to plan furniture or just unnecessarily large, and to create a sense of flow. So as you come through from the front door, you flow through to the entrance, and then that guides you through to the living room or the staircase, and there's windows that are in key positions. So that kind of consistency as the design as a whole is really critical to making the architecture work. Some customers will want a more cellular lifestyle where they'll want more smaller rooms. And then some customers really just love those massive open plan spaces. But either way, we still have to think about how it will be as a lived experience. Quite often when we start at the beginning of a project, we are thinking about the sense of coming home. So when you arrive home and you're looking at your front door, can you see your front door? Does it entice you and feel like a welcoming place to come? Or, we want to avoid those situations where you arrive, as I'm sure we all have, at somebody else's house and you're a bit unsure. You don't quite know where the front door is, you end up round the side and knocking on the window, and it doesn't feel very welcoming, and it's kind of maybe facing away from you. So we're often, particularly on the sites that are a little bit larger, where there are more options in terms of access or where you might enter the property, we're often thinking about these just strategic questions about which way does the house want to face, how welcoming is it going to be, and how can we make the building kind of flow in the landscape as well? Does it feel squeezed up against a boundary, and those kind of bigger, more architectural ideas. So we think that if you get those ideas right from the beginning, then the house can work really, really well and just be a much better property for it. When the customers come to us, sometimes they've got a previous design with another architect that for whatever reason is too complex, or maybe it's too expensive, and we start again. Sometimes we're starting from scratch where there is nothing at all, the customer's never worked with anybody. And sometimes we take on other people's designs and modify them and then build them. About 80% of the projects in the studio we design from scratch, and the other 20% are coming from previous designs. We follow the RIBA design stages, which broadly are stages 1 to 3 is the stages up to planning. Stage 4 is the technical design, and then stage 5 is the construction. And we follow those RIBA stages because they're well known, and we are, within the business, we have architects as well, and quite often our customers have previously worked with an architect. So we still use the same structure just to get us through the design process. But obviously we're doing more than just the design, we're doing the manufacture and construction. We take on a number of different sites. So sometimes clients come to us more often than not with a property to demolish. So it could be too small, it could be dilapidated, or it could just be not a very nice house, and we quite often demolish those houses and design and rebuild in the same spot or close to. Sometimes we have backland site developments where there are a lot of other surrounding buildings, but the site has been previously used for something, maybe garages, something like that, or one of the projects we did in Highgate was a tennis court. The other type of project we take on are more virgin fields where we are putting application in to get planning permission for a house where there is no house, and that we've got to establish that right to build. Those are the more challenging projects, but we also take those on. As a rule of thumb, we can build on any site as long as you can get a bin lorry on site. That's our kind of main metric. That means we know we can get our machinery on there, we can get our beams delivered. That's the simplest metric, if you like. If you have trouble getting a bin lorry on site and you've got really restricted access, it might not be for us. So when we're designing properties, sometimes there are planning constraints which really define the form. So if we're in an area that's very much part of a public domain, the house is quite close to the street, maybe it's in an area where it's got quite nice properties of a certain period, we can be slightly more conservative with our design, and we might do what we call contemporary vernacular. So we'll have a pitch roof on it, it might have a slightly more traditional form to it. Whereas there are other projects where we have a bit more license to be very modern, and a customer who wants that as well. So that kind of defines why some of the projects on our portfolio are very contemporary and some of them are less so. So one of the things we are well known for doing is for speeding up the construction process, where if we've got planning permission, we know exactly how much it costs already, that's been determined at a previous date, we can just crack on and build it. So we'll go from planning permission to shovel in the ground within 3 months, whereas a traditional process that might take you 6 months to a year, and often longer. And our construction is very fast. We'll build in about typically 10 to 12 months for a very large complex property. A traditional contractor might do that in more like 18 to 24 months. But actually, the biggest thing that people overlook is the time it takes to get from planning permission to actually starting your construction. If you go through a traditional process, let's say with an independent architect, you've got your planning permission, they then need to do all of the technical design, which might be completely different to their last project. Then they have to send the technical design out to multiple contractors for pricing. Then you might wait for a few weeks or months to get your prices back. Maybe not everybody responds. Then you need to negotiate with the contractor and eventually get them to be appointed and mobilise. The traditional process, it can take a year to 2 years before you even start on site. So the time saving where we're shortening this down to just a few months is the biggest critical factor in the success of Facit Homes. The biggest concerns for all of our customers are costs. It's obviously the biggest driving factor in any building project. So we use a system that we've created, a dynamic costing system that allows us to cost the project with a high level of accuracy based on just some very simple calculations on how big the property is, rough shape of it. And that allows us to set a budget from day one. And then we're constantly going through from design and costs and back again between the two, and that we're not getting down the end towards the end of the design and then suddenly discovering that it's too expensive for the customer. So costs are always at the top of our mind in the design process. And I would say that's probably one of the areas where we deliver best value, is that we're able to, with the knowledge that we have of the costing process and construction costs, we're able to think about these two at the same time and not have to do design and then somebody else does the costs and it turns out to be too expensive. So in terms of fixed prices, the way that we operate is the majority of the project is built on a fixed price, apart from things that we just are unable to. So for example, if we are putting piling in the ground, the piles quite often have to go to a certain strength depth, which can't be determined until you put them in the ground. The Walton project, our case study here, all of the groundworks were on a fixed price because there wasn't any piles. The only things that are not fixed prices because there's some client involvement, and they're budget prices. So for example, we have a budget for the flooring, the customer knows there's adequate budget for that flooring, and then when they come to choose it, they could either choose a more expensive flooring or a less expensive flooring, and the price will be adapted as suits. So, we're delivering this on a fixed price, on time, on budget. That's the way we operate. So Facit Homes, due to the kind of nature of our business, we're unable to take on projects that are less than about 150 to 180 square meters typically. So construction value, really the minimum size we can take on as a business is about £800,000, which is mainly due to the fact that we've become not as competitive on the smaller projects because we're a reasonably large business. We have to run and operate the site, etc. At Facit Homes, we have what we call core products, and the core products are our foundation systems, the structural framing systems, windows, door sets, heating systems, electrical, ventilation systems are included in that as well. But then beyond that, there's a lot of flexibility. So we don't have any specific standard for kitchens, for example, or for tiling or taps. We do have go-to companies that we use for sanitary ware, for tiling, but sometimes customers want to have something very specific, and we're always happy to adapt and get the interior look and feel to be whatever the customer wants it to be. So some customers might choose for us to fit an IKEA kitchen, for example, with a upgraded door front. Others might go and spend, 20, 30, 40,000 pounds on a custom-made kitchen, and again, we're happy to support that within our process. So we often get heavily involved on the interior design side. In the studio, we have a lot of experience of choosing materials and finishes and creating palettes of materials that go well together. It's important that you're not just choosing individual finishes or items that you think look good. It's the combination of these. So we're often collecting and collating these samples together. So putting a flooring sample next to a countertop sample, next to a paint sample, you're comparing all of these and making sure that they work well together. We've got extensive knowledge of current themes and brands in materials and suppliers. And that's what we do. We design these interiors for the customers to get the exact specification that they need and get a really good look and feel. So for the supply and the costing of the interior, we work on an open book basis on getting best price. So we'll go to the market, see where we can get the best prices for sanitary ware, taps, finishes, whatever it happens to be, get a really good price, and then we will put our margin on top of it. So the customer can be sure they're getting a really good price, and there's no RRP prices or anything. It's literally on the price that we pay, and a completely open book, and that goes for the entire interior fit out, be it a floor, be it a tile, be it a kitchen, whatever it is. We do it on a completely transparent open book basis, all above board, no sneaky underhand deals.
Thanks for joining us once again on our Facit Builds episode. In the next episodes, we're going to get started with the project. We're going to be talking to you about the design process, what it looks like to design a house alongside us at Facit Homes. So we'll be back in the studio for the next couple episodes, and then we'll be on site actually digging the foundations and going through the entire construction process. So stay tuned for that. If you are thinking about building your own project and your own dream home, then please get in contact with us at info@facit-homes, or go to our website where you can fill out our contact form, where you'll reach one of us and we can talk to you more about your projects. Otherwise, if you like this episode, simply give us a like and a subscribe to help us grow the channel. Share it with anyone that's thinking about building their own home. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next episode where we'll delve into the design process and actually going through planning.